Isaac Newton's mathematical laws provided a perfect map for the mechanics of the everyday world. But as physicists developed the tools to observe the extreme edges of reality, the subatomic quantum realm, those reliable classical rules ceased to function. Modern neuroscience relies on a similar classical rulebook, the materialist model, which assumes the physical brain creates the conscious mind. This works for clinical observations of intoxication or head trauma. But this model reaches a breaking point at the very edge of human existence, the moment of clinical death. When a patient's heart stops and brain activity flatlines, the materialist framework predicts a total fading of consciousness. Instead, thousands of survivors describe a sudden clarity, a state where their thinking becomes sharper and their perception more expansive than any moment in their waking life. Dr. Bruce Grayson, a professor emeritus of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, has spent 50 years investigating this discrepancy. His work at the Division of Perceptual Studies focuses on the empirical data behind these reports rather than the folklore. This paper introduced the Grayson NDE scale, a standardized metric that brought clinical rigor to the study of near-death experiences. By applying this scale to cardiac arrest survivors, research consistently shows that between 17 and 20% of patients report these profound subjective events. Skeptics frequently attribute these reports to hypoxia, or oxygen deprivation in the dying brain. However, clinical studies found that patients reporting an NDE often have higher peripheral oxygen levels than those who do not have the experience. Others point to medical narcotics as a cause of hallucinations. But pharmacological intervention during resuscitation actually tends to inhibit these memories. Patients under the heaviest sedation report the fuzziest accounts, while those without drugs recall the most vivid, lucid experiences. The most challenging evidence for the materialist model is veridical perception. Unconscious patients with no measurable brain activity have returned with accurate, verified descriptions of specific medical instruments, conversations, and technical procedures occurring in the room, details they could not have seen with their physical eyes. This accumulation of data complicates the argument that the brain alone generates the mind. It suggests that consciousness can persist even when the physical organ responsible for it has been deactivated. To account for this data, Dr. Grayson suggests an alternative model. The brain functions less like a generator and more like a radio receiver. A radio doesn't create the music, it catches a massive field of ambient frequencies and filters them down into a single audible track. From an evolutionary standpoint, a filter is a survival necessity. Our brains evolved to prioritize information that keeps us alive, finding food, avoiding predators, while blocking out the vast, non-essential background of cosmic reality to prevent sensory overload. We see this biological censorship in our own senses. The human eye only detects a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. We are effectively blind to the infrared and ultraviolet waves that surround us because they aren't critical for our immediate physical survival. Within this framework, our everyday waking consciousness is a severely restricted, biologically edited version of a much larger field of information. During a cardiac arrest or clinical death, the brain's electrical activity is suppressed. This physiological crisis causes the biological filtering mechanism to finally shut down. With the filter removed, experiencers describe a sudden collapse of physical boundaries. They report extreme time distortion and panoramic life reviews, processing all past actions objectively. This state appears to grant access to transcendental information that cuts across all cultural and religious lines. Experiencers frequently describe encountering a brilliant light characterized by unconditional love or communicating with deceased relatives. If the brain's primary role is to restrict our perception, then its failure at death may explain why consciousness appears to expand. In this model, the mind is simply rejoining the wider frequencies it was evolved to ignore. While the hospital room events are extraordinary, their reality is confirmed by the permanent psychological shifts survivors bring back. These transformations often intensify over decades, suggesting a profound shift in the person's core values. This research discusses terror management theory, which posits that much of human behavior is a subconscious defense against the existential dread of dying. We build our identities and cultures to shield ourselves from the fear of an ending. Statistical analysis indicates that the life review and the encounter with mystical beings uniquely resolve this dread. Up to 100% of survivors return with a near-total, permanent elimination of the fear of death. This is most evident in patients who survived a suicide attempt and experienced an NDE. Despite their prior despair, they rarely attempt suicide again, instead reporting a newfound conviction that life is a purposeful learning process that must be seen through to its natural conclusion. As the fear of death vanishes, materialistic drives typically follow. Survivors often abandon high-status careers or competitive lifestyles, reporting a surge in altruism and a deep, unshakable sense of interconnectedness with all living things. The survival of consciousness suggests that dying is the final lifting of our biological blinders. And once a person is no longer paralyzed by the fear of an ending, they are finally capable of living to the fullest. Thank you for watching. If this touched something real inside you, please share with someone who needs it. And if you want to go deeper, subscribe and thank you.